May I have your name, little lady?
Donna Stone. I'm married and have 2 children.
And you're a housewife?
Well,
Oh, now don't tell me you're a spy for the FBI.
well, what I meant was I'm a housewife.
Well, we got that out of you. Now, Mrs. Stone, we realize that housewives mold public opinion and are instrumental in shaping our national policies. Now, I have a question I'd like to ask you, but it's very important. And before you answer, I want you to think very carefully. Are you ready? All right. While baking an upside-down cake, do you recommend standing on your head? Well, if it isn't our little housewife who bakes the upside-down cakes, welcome back to Housewife's Corner. Oh, I have another startling question for you today. Now listen carefully. When a housewife...
Mr. Parker, what do you mean when you say housewife?
Everybody knows what I mean when I say housewife.
Well, then tell me. I'd like to hear.
Well, a housewife is, she takes care of the children.
Well, then she's a nurse for one thing. What else is a housewife?
Well, a housewife solves all the problems that come up around the house.
Well, then she's a psychologist. Now, when you come home at night, does your wife discuss your show with you?
Oh, yes, she's very intelligent. She just loves it.
Well, then she's a diplomat.
Well, thank you very much. It's been very pleasant.
Mr. Parker, I was just trying to say that every housewife has a personality. We're not part of a herd. We're not just housewives.
Well, I never said that.
Now, tell me, when things go wrong, does your wife manage to say just the right thing to make you feel that all isn't lost?
Sure, but...
Well, then she's a philosopher.
Look, lady, what are you trying to prove?
Mr. Parker, I'm just trying to prove that you can't use the word housewife as a label. Every woman you call just a housewife is a nurse, a psychologist, a diplomat, and a philosopher. Isn't that true, Mr. Parker?
Well...
Isn't it true?
Well, yes, it is.
Thank you very much for answering that question. Oh, here. McClure's would like you to have this for being such a grand sport.
Welcome to Advanced TV Herstory. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. This is the place where we connect the dots of TV and feminism to American culture and politics. Listeners, that was 1960. And the purpose of today's episode is to discuss in depth Donna Reed and her place in feminist TV herstory, because I think we all are walking around with some assumptions that are not correct. So we're going to be kind of honest about feminism and the history of feminism and the expectations of women of that generation. Donna Reed. Wow. What a story, what a life, and what a legacy. So we're here today to talk with Donna Reed's legacy with her daughter, Mary Owen. And I'm not sure where this is all going to go because I've only chatted with Mary once or twice. But Mary, welcome to Advanced TV Herstory, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and this path that you've been on to not just preserve your mother's legacy, but in fact to speak to the accuracy of it.
Hello to everyone out there in podcast land, and thank you for having me. Gosh, where to begin? I think growing up, I was just a kid during the time of the television show, but I was around all this creative energy. Then as a teenager, I was rebellious against the perfect image that she portrayed, or what I assumed she portrayed, just because I was a rebellious teenager. But as an adult, I've come to realize that this was her and my father's collaboration. They said they climbed a mountain together. And, my dad was the principal architect. And even though my mother was in front of the camera and her name was on the title of the show, she was also behind the scenes and also a working mom when that wasn't so popular or common, and also raising her family at home.
One of the threads that I think we might get into is a little bit of her Midwestern upbringing and her background and how that charted through some of her language and perhaps some of the decisions that she and your dad made in developing and then airing a very successful TV show for 6, 7 seasons?
8.
8. Where was your dad from? Because your mother is from Denison, Iowa.
Yes, mom was from rural Western Iowa. My father was Jewish and from New Orleans originally. And at some point, his family moved to Chicago. And that's where he went to school. And he wrote in college, he wrote in the sports section, in the entertainment section, really loved the business, was quite handsome, moved to Los Angeles in the hopes of making it as an actor. That did not work out. So he became an agent. And he worked for the Feldman Agency, which I think was the top agency in those days. And that's how he met my mother. And he knew when he met my mother that he was going to marry her. Of course, she was already married, but that maybe is another story. So he loved the business, very extroverted, but I think what they really shared was ambition. And so they married by the end of World War II in 1945. I think he is crucial to her career, actually, because let's face it, in those days, the business was completely and utterly controlled by men. And also, fair to fair, there was a lot of handshaking and geniality between men, too, that maybe doesn't exist anymore. And he was very good at that as well. But after she won the Oscar in From Here to Eternity, she ended up with mostly B Western roles. So her film career was just going south.
Any theories on why after the Oscar?
Well, they say there's a curse when you win the supporting role, that there are no good roles after that. I don't know. Maybe they didn't know what to do with her. Honestly, she kind of had aged out. She was 35, 36. That's probably pretty old in those days for an actress. So they started their own production company and made a couple of movies. And my dad was a producer, and the family lived in London for a couple of years. She made a movie over there too, and he created a few movies. And then they decided to try television. Even though the movies had done well critically, nothing was a big hit.
When I did the episode called The 80s Moneyed Matriarchs, which was a very fun episode, I talked about Barbara Bel Geddes and Jane Wyman. And there was this period where Donna Reed filled in for Barbara Bel Geddes, was supposed to technically replace her on Dallas when Barbara had health issues. And then I think Barbara recognized that she really had a great thing going and wanted back. And so then there was this lawsuit and everything. So that was kind of the last we heard of Donna Reed. And then he's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer and passes not super long after that. The political context of this, or the social context of the mid-'80s, was a challenge from the second wave feminists hurting a little bit that the ERA didn't pass. We kind of felt like maybe the battles that had been waged were won permanently, like Roe versus Wade, and everything was only going to get better. And so it was kind of easy to take anybody who represented that previous existence and turn their efforts, well, if not turn it against them, at least minimize those efforts. And I think if you were to go back and now watch the Donna Reed show, you're going to say, 1960, actually, the subject matter and the scripts are quite bold. They are progressive. So that's where we're going to talk a little bit more about the packaging of Donna Reed and about who ran things and what it took in 1960 to be different. And that's what she was. So I'll ask this, Mary. When we think about life here in 2025 and recognizing that some of that progress is attempting to be eroded even, and that there are people who would like to see things happen to persons who don't have a lot of power, what can we learn from thinking about your mother's mission, her legacy, these 40 years later?
I think in her kind of gentle yet strident way, she made her way through a business that was very difficult and not great for women at the time. But she also made her own way. She participated in the World War II effort, interacting with soldiers, writing to soldiers, like everyone did. Then she turned to television, and with her power of her film career, took very seriously talking to American families and also representing the wife of a doctor. My dad wanted to make sure that the husband had a good job. And within those constraints of the sponsorship, who essentially had most of the control over the television shows in those days, tried to weave in and out of femininity and being a mother, but also playing the role of a father. When episodes, they usually came back to where they started, but there was a fair amount of wiggling in between. And then the show was over. The Vietnam War was there. She used her power to try and end the war. And I think she just did all of it with a lot of integrity, which I don't see too much of these days.
The Donna Reed Show is about Donna, sort of small townish, married to a pediatrician back when pediatricians actually perhaps had an office in their home and then went to the hospital for the rest of things. And it's this glimpse into 1960, and you wonder, is that really how it was? So we have the Donna Reed Show, 2 kids, a middle-class lifestyle that could be supported on one income. And Donna, for the most part, represented volunteerism and compassion and discipline and an accountability. And when you think about the other TV series, perhaps the ones that you saw in syndication, you get things like Leave It to Beaver and The Patty Duke Show and Hazel. So, Mary, it might seem like an obvious question, but what differentiated the Donna Reed Show from those?
First of all, you have an incredible amount of chemistry between all the players, the principals. And let's face it, the show is named after her. So she's the lead, and it's from the mother's point of view. There's also, when there was a choice to play for laughs or to play for drama, my mother always chose drama. Some of these other shows are kind of laden with laughs, and the Donna Reed Show is not. I mean, really, from the mother's perspective, I think Leave It to Beaver was really kind of from Beaver's perspective. Father knows best. I mean, this was really mother knows best.
That's a great point. If we go back through what is still available to be seen, a lot of people would say, well, the first time we really got to know a character was Mary Tyler Moore. But then you can dial it back another 3 years and you can say Anne Marie from That Girl. And then when you dial it back further, the Donna Reed Show, she was the star. And this was a day in the life of this kind of woman versus her kids versus her husband. And that in and of itself was pretty significant. The Patty Duke Show was life through the eyes of a teenager, or in effect, 2 teenagers. And that was concurrent. That actually developed after the Donna Reed Show got its start. So the notion that, at least from a television programmer's perspective, there was money in women being the lead character on a TV show, that was kind of big. Because before Donna, really what you had were a string of variety shows that relied on someone's singing talent, or Betty White, God love her and rest in peace. And there were so many iterations of the Betty White Show. So that's some of the important context that you need to recognize, because you just can't blow off Donna Reed and her accomplishments, because when she passed away, we didn't have that level of recognition. We hadn't thought that much about what those early years of second wave feminism really meant in the media, in a medium such as television, that grew to have such tremendous impact at the time, and then in reruns, in syndication, that we can see it even today. And that's what makes it almost a socio-educational experience, because now we start to see the craft that she brought to the screen as an actor. Because apart from the incredibly starched shirtwaist dresses, which are amazing, and the entire mid-century vibe that you get, she uses her facial expressions as capably as anybody, as did Betty White. They knew exactly how to time their expressions, and they had a variety, and you can really appreciate that. So those are some of my observations jumping into the series.
I would also add that, and I'm probably biased, but I feel like you're part of the family somehow. That's maybe a comforting thing. But I think that also might differentiate it from other shows. And also, I think Donna Stone really is a complex character and oftentimes contradictory.
I would agree. Listeners, if you were to watch an episode such as this one from season 5 called A Woman's Place, and we're going to play a clip of it in a second, but I can tell you at the end of it all, she sort of relents on her ambition, if she even believed in herself to have that ambition. And that's where we can say, yes, she was progressive. Yes, she and the writers had to sort of live within a set of expectations of what was real and rational and what would have been over the top, and everyone would have become suspicious that she had motives, motives that were all about the women's movement.
Donna! Donna! Donna!
Yes.
Oh, there you are. Now, you listen to me.
I thought you were asleep.
Oh, I was asleep, all right. I've been asleep for too long.
Hey, I didn't know what you're talking
You know
about.
perfectly well what I'm talking about. This is political nonsense. This campaign.
Oh, the meeting. Oh, my.
Oh, just a minute.
Oh, honey, I can't argue about it now. Later.
No, it's later now. It's later than you think. We're going to settle this political business once and for all.
Honey, there are people waiting for me.
Now, what about your family? I suppose everybody else comes first.
Now, just what is that statement supposed to mean?
It means that I'm tired of losing my buttons. I'm sick of eating leathery eggs and carbon toast. And I'm sick and tired of being the first lady of the land.
Alex, I just don't understand.
Well, if you spend a little more time around the house, you know perfectly well what I'm talking about.
Alex, I cannot run for office and spend time around the house at the same time. And furthermore, it was you and the kids who pushed me into this.
Oh, we didn't push you into it. I told you it was a decision you had to make for yourself.
Mother, we can take care of ourselves. It'll give you something to do with your time a little later on. And Mother, the country needs you, remember?
Well, we need you more than the country does.
Say that again.
Say what again?
That you need me?
I thought you knew that.
But you and the kids were so anxious for me to take on this job.
How important is this campaign to you?
Well, I only took it on because I thought you and the kids wanted me to.
We only wanted you to because we thought you wanted to.
I only wanted to because I thought you wanted me to want to.
If nothing else, you've certainly learned to talk like a politician.
Honey, I've learned lots of things. I'm not cut out for this campaign business. It takes experience. Enthusiasm isn't enough. I'd drop out of the campaign.
Well, at least that's settled. Now all you have to do is concentrate on being a wife.
Well, there's one good thing about being a wife. You don't have to be reelected every 4 years.
You know, that might not be a bad idea.
Oh, it's good to be home.
Donna Reed, she'd already won an Academy Award and been in It's a Wonderful Life and lived. This was kind of the second chapter of her professional career. You know, she was, as Mary describes, she was a bit of a feminist, maybe not necessarily accepting of that word because it's changed over time. She was a businesswoman, a mother, and she came from humble beginnings in Western Iowa. And this is where the Midwestern part kicks in, I think, a little bit. But those descriptions could also apply to Lucille Ball, who probably age-wise is probably pretty close. Hollywood was being run by men at the time, but Lucy dealt with physical comedy, and Donna brought a more gentle, family-oriented, the universal stories of family life to the screen. So, Mary, do you think that it was Lucy's physical comedy that sort of made her legend greater and her legacy more distinct?
I would agree with that. I Love Lucy has never not been on television, it seems like. And I do think all of that physical comedy, and it was really a comedy, and comedy has a universality to it that maybe is more attractive in a certain way than drama. I don't really know.
Well, and there's also a technical aspect because, as you said, I Love Lucy has pretty much been in syndication from the time it was created. And I know a lot of that has to do with the technical way that it was shot and preserved. And so do you know anything, as you have begun working to ensure that the Donna Reed Show is available in what we used to call syndication and now streaming, were there any technologic challenges from the way that it was originally rendered to then be able to get it into a modern day distribution?
Only mildly, just things like the ones that weren't, some of the tape had disintegrated or things like that, the film. But no, it looks great. In fact, when I introduced It's a Wonderful Life in New York, they screen the Christmas episode as people are walking in on the big screen, and it looks fantastic. It was stored properly.
So let's get back to your life, Mary, growing up. You had 3 siblings, you had working parents. It was a busy time in Hollywood. What was life like?
It's so funny. It's my least favorite question. I guess I have to say, I don't even know what to compare it to, even though it's all I knew. My siblings were older. So the older two were in high school and then left the house kind of early on. But it was very busy. My dad, thank God, was quite a lot of fun because I think my mother really was so busy and had so much responsibility. I mean, she was hiring and firing and going over all the dialogue. She wanted to make sure it was as realistic as possible. And of course, the show was idealized to a certain extent, but like I said, she took her role speaking to families quite seriously. So there was stress, but a lot of fun. And then my dad loved the business. He was always on, and all of his friends were behind the scenes people. And my mother was more introverted and was very, very passionate about her privacy. So when she came home and closed the door, that was it for her. She really tried to just be a mom at home, even though she had a lot of things, her wheels were spinning because the show was named after her. So it was kind of a mixture of both. My dad, there were a lot of good times. I had a nanny. I did not care for her, so that wasn't fun for me. My sister loved my nanny. Kids were over a lot, Shelley Fabre and Paul Peterson, who played her children on the show. Easter holidays, a lot of times, they were over, Thanksgiving. So I always used to say when I was little that my mother had two husbands.
As you saw your mother go from being overwhelmed with detail and the management responsibility of the series and the enterprise that she and your dad ran, when all of a sudden then in 1966, ABC is no longer showing the Donna Reed show, and maybe there was a little bit of a delay in a syndication deal, how did she take being relegated again with perhaps a hope of getting yet another TV series? What was going on with her then?
Well, the war in Vietnam was going on. My two brothers were of draft age. And I had mentioned to you before that she stayed friends with Barbara Avedon, who cut her teeth on the Donna Reed show. She started as a writer, then she directed a few episodes. Barbara also had a son who was draft age. So they thought this is not good and wanted to do something about it. So they rented this warehouse in Beverly Hills and co-chaired another Mother for Peace and were very active in the anti-war movement, which I participated in my little way. I was still pretty young, but I would go with my mom to the warehouse and, help stuff envelopes and be around this energy of mostly women working incredibly well together, trying to get an end to this war, writing speeches, planning trips to DC. It was a fantastic time. I think actually my mother really blossomed during this time.
So she was not, for all the reasons perhaps, or any reason, it was not so much that she was waiting for her career, for her reinvention again necessarily, as it was this focus of national concern that the country was not doing right by honesty and integrity and the real reason why we were in Vietnam.
Exactly. I think she was probably glad to be done with the show. She wanted to stop after the 5th season. And then Columbia Screen Gems made her and my father, I guess, an offer they couldn't refuse. So they extended 3 more years as employees of Screen Gems. So she never stopped working from like 1940. She might have taken a year or two off when she had my brother Tim in the late 40s. So I don't know if she thought her career was over, but I think she was definitely glad to not be doing the show anymore.
From what I understand of television production then and now, it's a grueling pace, made even harder if you have kids and you have a family and you value them. And she's running the business to some degree on the backside of the camera as well as being in front of it. So let's talk a little bit then about the availability of the series. And listeners, here's where you can find the Donna Reed Show circa 2025, 2026.
It's streaming on Amazon. I believe it's also streaming on Roku. I think it's available on Google TV, Google Play, Tubi, and then you can also purchase the DVDs if anyone does that anymore. But it is astonishing because each season has 35, 39 episodes. So grueling is the right word.
I think Peacock just recently had one season.
and also on MeTV.
Yes, and MeTV. With regard then to seasons 6, 7, and 8, are those the seasons that are sort of lost? You were sharing that it's been difficult to get all the seasons available.
Sony owns the rights to 6, 7, and 8. To be blunt, they're just too big to care. And I have tried. I have a distribution company that is happy to pay all the costs of digitizing 6, 7, and 8 and distributing them and offering them, and they just won't budge. And I've tried for years and years in different ways through different departments, those little hierarchies at Sony, and nobody will budge. So it's very sad because a lot of fans want to see those last 3 seasons.
So who owns then the rights to 1 through 5? Was that by virtue of your father and mother crafting the contracts just right?
Yes, it was their show, and the rights belong to me and my siblings.
Listeners, even from the time that I just recently watched a couple episodes from the first season to this episode, A Woman's Place, in the 5th season, she's looser. The family is looser. They're dealing with issues that were very appropriate in the wake of Betty Friedan and the feminine mystique and the soul searching that was going on as the Civil Rights Act was happening. Again, typical family content, but it definitely was representative of the times. And so if you get a chance to watch any of the episodes, make sure you dabble in the 5th season as well, as that's the last one that we can currently find. Another place, though, if you're kind of curious about all of this, is the fact that donnareed.org, holy mackerel, that is a website that has just a tremendous amount of functionality for fan engagement and a discussion of the archives, as well as back to her golden days in classic Hollywood, Donna's incredible film career. Why, Mary, then, do you think Donna and her legacy, that legacy of positive, strong, and yet smart? Your mother never, I don't believe, ever had a role where she was kind of a dumb blonde, and that's to her credit, too. Why does she resonate with people even today? And if you've got stories to share about the stewardship you've done of it all, I'm sure listeners would be fascinated.
Thank you. I mean, of course, It's a Wonderful Life, through some kind of magic of television, has become a forever film now. I've been introducing it since 2007, and my audience now is kids in their 20s and early 30s because they grew up watching it with their family and they're keeping the tradition. So I get a lot of great stories about my mother from young people who've watched it through the years with a parent, and now the parent is deceased. I mean, even when my mother was alive, she would get notes from people saying that they were on the brink of ending their lives and saw the film and it changed their mind. So there's that. The TV show was wildly popular. Once the show was over and in between my mother's letter writing and campaigning to support Eugene McCarthy and end the war in Vietnam, she answered fan letters. She sat down and hand wrote answered fan letters. As a kid, just as a side note, trying to go out and grocery shop with her, she was always kind to people who recognized her, and she always took time to talk with them. And as a little kid, it's like, why do I have to share my mom with everyone, you know?
On the website, there is a quote, perhaps, of follow your dreams with integrity, courtesy, equity, and humanity. Is that from her? Is that sort of her mantra? Because it sure sounds Midwestern. As a Midwesterner, I can say that the behaviors that you had to deal with of your mother corresponding and happily getting stopped, that's got a Midwestern feel to it.
Yes, definitely. I think what's ironic to me about the television show is that she never had that kind of a life that she represented. She grew up in rural Iowa. She was the oldest of 5 kids and didn't really go into Denison much until she went to high school. So Christmases and all of that, they all socialized rurally with other families and the other Mullingers that were living outside of town on farms. And then that I grew up in Beverly Hills is just completely crazy that she went from that to that.
So did she actually say in a speech or in a script, follow your dreams with integrity, courtesy, equity, and humanity?
I think it's a quote from a speech that she gave I know she spoke to sponsors, Campbell's Soup and things like that, but I think it is a quote from a speech, yes.
Do you think that some of her Midwestern roots and her Midwestern character contributed to her being misunderstood?
Wow, I have never been asked that before. Huh. Well, I mean, I think she rode the cultural transition from the 50s to the 60s. It can go either way. I mean, you could go, well, she just decided to play it safe and be a housewife or whatever. Or she tried in these ways that were difficult because of sponsorships to kind of go outside the bounds in an episode, of course, having to come back. But I don't know. I mean, so many of the actresses were from the Midwest.
With the distinction, though, that your mother was able to leverage the first part of her career into the second part with a strong arm on the business side. And if we're going to save somebody from the late 50s and the early 60s who represented a modicum of progress, I think we've got to hang on to Donna, just as we are hanging on to Diane Carroll and Hazel Scott.
The New York Public Library sent me a few recordings by a journalist who had passed away and left. He interviewed a lot of celebrities and he left all of it to the New York Public Library, even though I think he was from Minnesota. Mom did say, and I did not know this, that they wanted to have a Black character on the show, and the powers that be said absolutely not.
As luck would have it, Mary shared this information with me just weeks before I was scheduled to be in Manhattan. What luck! Oh my gosh. The New York Public Library has an amazing online database, though it does help to know exactly what you're looking for, so Mary's tip was hot. I was able to determine what the files were that I wanted to view, or listen to, I should say, and in early December, I sat in the Cornell McClintock Special Collections Room at the New York Public Library in the Library for the Performing Arts, which is a subset of the NYPL, at Lincoln Center. It was very cool. They presented me with one of their laptops and a headset where I listened to an interview between Donna and Cliff Jar in 1984. Now, picture that the audio quality was suboptimal. Maybe Cliff had popped a cassette into a recorder the size of a shoebox, because this was 1984, or he had one of those little handheld dictation recorders with a microcassette. He was not recording this for audio purposes, but rather for records. So I wrote verbatim the most relevant parts of their conversation, and here they are. He had probed Donna about what made the Donna Reed Show special and why it was ahead of its time. And she said, "I didn't feel when we made it that it was a typical genre of its time. I felt that we had made some statements and progress for women, small steps." And then he probed a little bit more about what that meant. And she said, "The mom was an equal, and I think that was trouble." And I think she meant trouble for the networks. Moms weren't supposed to be equal. Then she went on to talk about an attempt that she and her husband, Tony Owen, had made to make the series more progressive in the second or third season. And so she said he, a Black neighbor boy, was to have been a playmate of Jeff's. And this was very brazen for the times. He was to have come into the kitchen and sat down for cookies and milk. And then she told Cliff, "Well, I tell you, the sponsors and network told us, you can shoot it, but we will never play it on our network. How about that?" she said to Cliff. She followed that up by saying, when it came time, when they, the television networks, were forced, like if you were shopping, you could have a Black person in the grocery store. Well, guess who did it first? She finishes up by saying, and this is some of her challenge as a woman in the business who shifted from film to TV. "Hollywood sound stages don't like lady bosses. I'm not even sure they like ladies. That was the biggest adjustment I had to make." In other words, she wasn't sure that the network would have listened to her, even with more than 30 years of experience in the business, if she hadn't been considered a producer. That was my takeaway from the New York Public Library. We are talking about Donna Reed. We are learning new things, and we're kind of looking at her legacy in a whole different way. And that's what I'm challenging you to do as well. And do so, if you have the opportunity, with an older member of your family, a woman or man, who might relate to you that, in fact, that was a big deal series. My parents have now been long past, and I didn't take the time to talk about vintage TV because life was too busy and the availability of some of the series just isn't what it is today. So I encourage you, when you are trying to find common ground, enjoy something together, and have them perhaps explain a little bit more about what was going on in their lives that helped make Donna a little bit of comfort TV. I'm going to wrap this up with Mary to ask her about the other speaking packages that she offers up. What other topics do you cover other than Donna's legacy on television?
I love talking about her participation in the war effort in World War II because, completely unbeknownst to any of us until we found it in 2003 in an old trunk, she corresponded with soldiers. She was part of the pinup culture, for lack of a better way of putting it, although she was a little younger. So I think the way she represented the home front was a little different than the more sexualized women. So that is fascinating to me, and I love to read the letters, or I usually find some young guy in the audience or whatever and have him read the letters. And I incorporate that into introducing It's a Wonderful Life. But I love talking about any of her films. From Here to Eternity holds up really well. I love speaking, with authors who've written about the Second World War and talk about her films. So yeah, anything having to do with either career, I love to talk about, even though she made over 40 movies, but the most popular ones are It's a Wonderful Life and From Here to Eternity.
I saw that there's reference to some of those GI letters on the donnareed.org website. It's the structure for the foundation and the museum, which is in Iowa. And it goes back to Donna's connection with what is considered her hometown, even if she technically grew up outside of Denison, Iowa. How has that enterprise, that nonprofit that was developed to archive her legacy and maintain it, how has that changed over the last few years?
Between 9/11 and COVID, it's changed it a lot. But the archive, since I moved to Iowa and didn't really explore it until now, and then, of course, like I said, my mother really tried to keep her professional life not separate, but she just tried to be a mom at home. I had no idea that she saved everything. The archive is fantastic. It's been an interesting way for me to get to know my mother through her own biography from what she saved.
How do people get a hold of you then to do an introduction or to have you speak to their group?
DonnaReed.org.
If someone uses the contact form there, then it ultimately gets to you.
Yes.
All right. So that's your opportunity, listeners, to either contact Mary for her to bring a polish and a panache to your screenings or to your book club or to a group that is a fan of vintage television or classic film. Or, because it's a contact form, if there's somebody in your family who has a great memory of it, then capture that and send that message in. And then it's going to get kept. And it's kind of part of the continuous evolving understanding of the impact and legacy of Donna Reed. So I'm going to close out. Normally, what I would ask of a guest is, what was the TV series that was so important to you? But in this case, one basically occupied your life for the first 10 years or so of your life. So I'll ask a different one. If you could ask your mother one question, recognizing she's been gone now almost 40 years, what would it be?
I might ask her if she had any regrets. I would probably also apologize to her for being such a mean teenager.
Well, my dad passed away 1 year later in 1987, and he was quite young. And the last 2 years of his life, he was in poor and worsening health. And I don't play this for a laugh, but I play it from a point of Midwestern utility and practicality. And that is, I would ask him how to wire a lamp, how to do a light fixture, because that was his thing. He could do it. I'm sure he taught my brother. He may have taught my sister. And I didn't get that because I was a little bit younger. He was kind of a MacGyver. He kind of thought of himself as a handy guy all the way around. And so he had that knowledge of electricity and other things. And I didn't get any of it. And when you think of how many years in your life you've stood and looked at a light fixture that you really want to have replaced, that's what I didn't get. Celebrating the legacies of the people who came before us, whether they are Donna Reed or my dad, Mel. That's a little bit of why we podcast here at Advanced TV History, just to recognize that we all came through this together, and usually the TV set was on. So many, many thanks to Mary Owen coming to us to have this conversation about her mother and the work that they're doing to continue to preserve and explore her legacy. History is certainly teaching us a lot about what has gone on in the last 60 years. Every time she opens a box or receives an email or a contact card from somebody, she learns something that's a little bit more about the incredible power her mother had. Any final thoughts, Mary?
No, thank you. You put it well. And I just encourage people to get to know my mom. It's well worth it.
Mary, thanks for your time today. Editing this audio episode is Mary Lou Morose. The jingle music is Jazzers Take Me Higher, found at freemusicarchive.org. Go to the show notes for the links for donnareed.org and, some of the episodes that are available even on YouTube, I believe. We're going to throw some of those links in there just to make it easy for you to do a quick click and watch a little Donna Reed. You will not be disappointed and, in fact, have something new to think about, as I've been doing the last couple of weeks. That's it from here. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.